A single mom on the rebound finds happiness in the arms of a new man.
They were engaged and even starting to plan their wedding.
She already knew the colors. She couldn't stop talking about it.
But their wedding bells will never ring.
There's blood everywhere.
Her fiancé is the one who found her.
As the investigation begins, the bonds of love will be tested.
His timeline didn't necessarily add up.
After they broke up, they still saw each other.
There's a possibility for a love triangle going on.
Did he know she was cheating?
They both have a motive, and now they're pointing the finger at each other.
It opened all kind of doors and all kind of new questions.
You think you're gonna commit the perfect crime? That is no such thing.
November 18th, 2015. It's a typical Wednesday morning in Portage, Indiana, a suburban community at the southern tip of Lake Michigan.
Portage is about 45 minutes outside of Chicago. It's a quiet, safe community. It's the kind of place that people go to start families and get away from the big city.
But on this morning, one Portage family is about to learn that tragedy can strike anywhere, even in the safest of places.
911, what's your emergency?
Funny in the ambulance right now, please, please, please.
The caller is 20-year-old Martell Robinson.
He was so upset, crying hysterically.
He was just screaming, come help me. There's something wrong with my fiance.
Just lay on the ground, please.
Do you know what happened?
No, I don't.
He said he had just gotten home from working a late shift.
I just see blood just everywhere. Just please, just send somebody, please.
Sheriff's Department!
Within minutes, officers arrive on the scene.
The door was open, they come in at gunpoint and discover this guy in there.
Hands, show me your hands!
No, I was the one that called.
Okay, move to the corner of the room.
He clearly has blood on his clothing and his hands, so they didn't know what to take of it.
Sometimes the person who's making the 911 call is in fact the perpetrator.
Police quickly turn their attention to Martell's fiancée, 30-year-old Tiara Thomas.
She is laying on the floor. There's blood everywhere.
The young woman had been shot several times.
You can see that she has a head injury.
They didn't know what to think. Had they just walked in on a domestic dispute, or was there a killer on the loose?
Gary, Indiana native Tiara Thomas was always the life of the party.
She was a fun-loving person, very spontaneous, and someone that everybody got along with.
She loved to make people laugh, and when they were around her, they just felt warm and welcome and at home.
Though no one felt more at home around Tiara than Kevin Campbell.
Tiara and Kevin have a long history.
Together since high school, Kevin and Tiara had taken on every challenge thrown at them and formed a bond well beyond their years.
It was such a close relationship. Everybody kind of expected them to be together.
Well-mannered and respectful, Tiara's family felt Kevin was the perfect match.
They loved Kevin, and they loved how Tiara felt about Kevin. Her family took him in like he was one of their own.
It wasn't long before Tiara and Kevin announced they were adding a new member to the family, too.
After Kevin and Tiara graduated, she got pregnant.
Tiara and Kevin went from high school sweethearts to building a family almost immediately.
They're gonna have a child, and everyone was pretty sure that it was going to lead into marriage.
Though the two never tied the knot, over the next several years, they had 2 more children and continued building a life together.
Kevin became a police officer with Gary Police Department in Indiana.
Tiara got a job at the Department of Social Services and started taking evening classes at the local college.
Will I see you tonight?
Well, if you can pull me away from my homework, you can.
I'll see what I can do.
She had dreams of being an accountant, one day opening her own daycare.
All right.
As their family grew, Kevin and Tiara bought a house just outside Gary, and Kevin transferred departments to be closer to home.
People shift departments going to another department with a better position.
He seemed to be a hard worker.
They were both growing in their careers.
But with busy jobs and raising 3 kids, they had less time for each other, and the romance began to fade.
They had been together 14 years. They have 3 children together. So there was a lot vested in that relationship, but things started to gradually fall apart.
They started going their separate ways.
Eventually, Tiara and the kids moved out, and Kevin moved on.
Kevin started dating a young girl named Brooke, who was a waitress at a diner where a lot of local Hammond cops like to hang out.
Kevin's new relationship was a bit of a shock to Tiara.
When she found out that Kevin had a younger woman, that kind of made Tiara feel a little insecure.
It definitely didn't help that Kevin and Brooke got married and had a baby together.
Tiara was heartbroken.
They had been together for 14 years and he never popped the question. Suddenly, he made this new woman his wife. It was a big blow to Tiara.
But Tiara wouldn't stay down for long.
You got a minute?
Yeah, of course. Come in.
Tiara meets this young gentleman, Martel, who she works with.
Despite the colleagues' age difference, the two instantly hit it off.
Tiara was significantly older than Martel.
The age difference didn't even faze them. They just more so fell in love with each other.
They had a lot in common. Their conversations were great.
By the beginning of 2015, Martel moved into Tiara's apartment.
He'd also taken a night job at a nearby factory to start earning some more money.
Martel was all in. He loved Tiara and her children. He was in it for the long haul.
And unlike Kevin, Martel was willing to make it official.
He proposed to her, and they were set to be married.
1 second before I forget. I've been planning and looking, and look at this cake right here. What do you think about that?
Like I told you, if you love it, I love it.
That's why I love you.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
She was super excited to get married. She's ready to go.
Her and Kevin had been separated for about a year. Something felt different with Martel. It's like she had waited for him her whole life.
Tiara was in the best place of her life.
She almost had achieved her accounting degree. She was taking care of her 3 children. She had moved on.
Tiara's uncle had also helped her land a new job.
Tiara decided to go work for a monitoring services business.
Say some provision of your release says you have to wear an ankle bracelet, then that was what his company did.
The future for Tiara was really bright.
But now, on the morning of November 18th, 2015, her future hangs in the balance.
Hands, show me your hands!
No, I was the one that called.
Martel had just called 911 to report that he had found Tiara laying on the floor, covered in blood.
Patrol officers respond, find her in the bedroom.
There's pooling of blood under the victim, so they obviously know they have a very serious crime scene here.
It was gruesome.
There's a shoulder wound that wasn't fatal. There's also a shot that went through both arms to the head.
But there may be a faint glimmer of hope.
She's still alive.
By mid-November of 2015, 30-year-old Tiara Thomas was looking to the future with her new fiancé, Martel Robinson.
It was only 10 months into their relationship that he decided, let me just go ahead and pop the question.
They were in love and ecstatic to build a life together.
But on the morning of November 18th, 2015, Till Death Do Us Part becomes all too real.
After receiving a call from Martel, police arrived to find her lying on their bedroom floor, covered in blood, her body riddled with bullets.
At first, they thought she was dead, but they were able to detect a faint pulse.
She was clinging to life, so they're trying to do everything that they can.
She's transported out of there to the hospital.
While EMTs work to save Tiara, officers transport Martel to the station for a formal statement.
Despite him telling them that he came in and discovered her like that, they obviously can't verify that on his word.
Martell's the one who found her and called us. You have to look at him.
While Martell waits at the station, detectives arrive at the crime scene and begin their investigation.
They find these 9mm shell casings.
There was no weapon found, but detectives discovered a pillow with gunshot holes in it.
The belief is a pillow was used to try to silence the shots.
Detectives also find 2 unfired 9mm cartridges on the floor.
It's obvious that the gun used had jammed twice.
In order to clear the jam, the shooter would have to rack the slide, which would eject the unfired round.
Other aspects of the scene allow detectives to reconstruct the shooter's likely motive.
There was no signs of forced entry. It didn't appear that anything was stolen.
They had no evidence that there was an attempted sexual assault.
It appears to have been a cold-blooded, violent attack.
This was someone close to her, someone who either had a key or for whom she would have opened the door or who would have known when the door would have been unlocked.
A fact that immediately points to one man.
It would make sense for Martell to be a prime suspect.
He's found at the crime scene. He obviously has access and a key to the residence. Certainly the opportunity for him to be the perpetrator is there.
Martell could have shot Tierra, ditched the gun, and then called 911 as the distraught fiancé.
Hoping to identify when the shooting occurred, detectives canvass the apartment complex. But to their surprise, the effort comes up empty.
Canvassing the neighbors. No one really saw or heard anything.
Not even the next-door neighbor.
It does appear that a pillow was possibly used to muffle the sounds, and the physical construction of these apartments, they're pretty well bricked and insulated from sound. So it's not, totally unusual that some gunshots could go off and next door neighbor, he didn't hear anything.
The canvas a bust. Detectives head down to the station to question Martell. But when detectives join him in the interrogation room, Tierra's fiancé still appears beside himself with grief.
Please. Oh my God. Oh my God.
You okay?
No, sir, no.
Based on his reaction in the interrogation room, he's beyond heartbroken.
Or Martell's a good actor.
Well, I'm not sure what happened, so we're gonna.
Oh my God!
We're gonna try.
I should have been at home.
According to Martell, he and Tierra had been alone together earlier that evening.
The kids had spent the night with their father, Tierra's ex, Kevin Campbell.
Okay, Dad came to pick him up yesterday. So me and her, we was together up until 10 o'clock last night. That didn't work.
He stated that he works a shift and he gets off at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Martell also says just before his shift ended, he tried to call Tierra to make sure she was up in time for work.
I figured, hey, the kid's not home. She probably overslept. So as soon as I'm getting off work, I'm calling her phone.
She didn't answer, which was odd to him because he knew that she should be getting up, getting, ready for work.
According to Martell, he noticed something else odd when he got home.
Tierra.
My apartment was unlocked. Of course, I was going to go in there and say something to it because that's not safe.
Martell indicated to the officers that he had previously gotten on Tierra about keeping the door unlocked.
Tierra.
I walked in there. She was just on the floor, just bleeding everywhere.
He became very hysterical. He immediately called 911.
That's terrible to come home to. And I want to be here to talk to you and offer you any type of help that I can get you that way. But I also want to help her by finding out exactly what went down. We asked Martell, what does he think? Because, who would have done this?
Martell can think of only one person.
I don't want to say a baby daddy, but the kid's father and her don't get along.
He's saying the only person that might have beef with her is her ex, the father of her 3 children, Kevin Campbell.
He got a gun, he's a cop. That's the only thing that adds up to me.
And
nobody else would try to harm her at all.
Martell's quick accusation raises red flags for detectives.
He immediately pointed the finger at this guy, and police were thinking, is this an honest suspicion, or is this an attempt to throw the investigation off track?
Of course, those are things that, we're going to look at every way we can.
And in order to do that, detectives will need Martel's full cooperation.
We asked to do some tests, which he cooperated with. We wanted to examine his phone, which he immediately gave us.
He was asked for his clothing, articles as well. He immediately volunteered to surrender them for forensics.
At the end of the interview, detectives deal Martel a final blow.
He's got some really bad news, man.
Please, don't. Yeah. Please, I don't want to know.
Tierra had passed away.
Our fire department's really good about, getting them to the hospital as quickly as possible. But she ultimately succumbed to her injuries.
No! No, please, no!
He just broke down and cried.
Who was planning on fighting? No!
Martel was devastated. He was inconsolable, crying, wailing, and this could be heard throughout the police station.
Oh, my God!
Just hours after 30-year-old Tierra Thomas was shot in her Portage, Indiana apartment, detectives suddenly have a homicide investigation on their hands.
Medics came in and they started to treat her. She was ultimately transported to the hospital, but did not survive her injuries.
When they gave him the news, he seemed to be genuinely emotionally distraught about that.
While his reaction appears genuine, detectives can't help but wonder if they're watching a heartbroken fiancé or a killer trying desperately to cover his tracks.
Is this for the camera, so to speak? Is it, for our interview? Is it truly grief? Sometimes it's hard to say.
Especially considering Martel's insistence that Tierra's ex, Kevin Campbell, is responsible for her death.
Detectives can't help but notice that even though he's genuinely distraught, he seems to be very adamant in pointing the finger at Kevin.
Still, detectives follow his lead. Less than an hour after interviewing Martel, Kevin is called down to the station.
Kevin was also very emotional. He was in a complete state of shock. He was trying to figure out who could have done this to Tierra as well.
Kevin has been to the hospital, and he finds out that Tierra has passed away.
For the first several minutes of the interview, when we especially started talking about Tierra, he was crying.
How long were you guys together? It's okay. A lot happened today.
He's crying profusely, so much so that the police officer decided to kind of give him a minute.
He's a fellow brother police officer, so they give him certain consideration.
Once Kevin regains his composure, he's able to answer the detectives' questions.
They want to know just basically what's the nature of your relationship with the victim.
Were you married at some point? Okay. But you were raising 3 beautiful children, right?
Yeah.
They've been separated, but according to him, it's pretty amicable.
He talked about, she was great as far as allowing him to see the children.
Including the night before Tierra's murder.
He had picked the kids up 5:30-ish the prior night, brought them home, and said he was home all night until morning when he got them up.
What time did you have to get them all up?
A little after 5:45, I believe.
Kevin says he left at about 6:45 to take them to school in Portage.
Kevin said he hadn't seen Tierra since he picked them up, although they had been texting each other that night.
Kevin told the investigators that he was texting Tierra about homework for the kids.
You guys kind of went back and forth about school stuff?
And then the next morning, he texted her again.
He said that he didn't hear from Tierra that morning.
Do you think anything one way or the other, unusual or not unusual, that she didn't respond?
I feel she must still been asleep.
Okay.
It seems he wasn't worried enough to go check on her. But even if he had, Kevin tells detectives that he didn't have a key to her apartment.
My oldest has a key, but he doesn't bring it with him.
Next, detectives asked Kevin the same question they asked Martell Robinson. Who would want to hurt Tiara?
My first thought would be Martell.
Much like Martell, Kevin seemed intent on implicating the other man in Tiara's life.
Detectives had two men, both emotional, both having feelings for the victim, pointing the finger at each other.
But is there another possibility?
Was she jealous of the gal that's your wife now?
I don't think so.
They weren't ruling anything out at this point. And detectives knew that there's a possibility for jealousy or envy to also be a part of this whole situation.
Brooke was the new wife, and although Kevin had been with Tiara for 14 years, he never married her.
Detectives wondered if, in Tiara's mind, Brooke had broken up her family. And perhaps in Brooke's mind, Tiara was always going to be a part of Kevin's life. And maybe she was tired of living in her shadow.
Detectives bring Brooke in for questioning that afternoon, where she's pretty candid about her relationship with Tiara.
I don't think she ever really got over the fact of Kevin marrying me.
He wanted to include the 3 children in his wedding, and Tiara did not. It strained whatever relationship there ever would be between them all.
Brooke goes on to say that she didn't have any animosity toward Tiara.
Lord knows I tried to be nice to her, but she just wasn't having it. She just couldn't.
Brooke also told detectives that, as far as she knew, Kevin had been home all night.
I was up about 2 or 3 times with the baby, and he slept right through it.
So she gives him an alibi to his whereabouts at the time of the murder.
Brooke said she never left the house either. She had been taking care of their young child all night.
With Kevin and his new wife seemingly alibied out, detectives circle back to Martell.
The police speak to his supervisor to question him about Martell's whereabouts.
I spoke to his supervisor of the midnight shift, who said he saw him all night.
He worked that late shift. He got off at 7 in the morning.
And then the plant manager saw him at probably 10 minutes to 7. We pretty much could place him there all night.
So with both alibis seemingly checking out, detectives are at a standstill.
Could there be something or someone detectives have overlooked?
Maybe there's a third man in Tiara's life, somebody that her ex and her fiance had no idea about.
Hoping to gain more insight into Tiara's personal life, detectives spend the next day digging into her background, starting with where she worked.
Tiara's worked for a monitoring service that monitored convicted felons.
She was working with former inmates.
Though not directly, according to what Tiara's boss tells detectives when they contact the company.
She didn't really have any contact with them.
Nothing could have occurred with any of the electronic monitoring individuals.
Tiara's workplace a bust, detectives next turn to her social circle.
As part of the investigation, they're going to reach out to the close friends and acquaintances of the victim.
Though it's not until detectives sit down with a friend of Tiara's named Stephanie Phillips that they truly learn anything useful.
She laid it out. I mean, she was very clear. She said, listen, you know, Martell and Tiara are good. Their relationship is good.
So she wasn't seeing anyone else?
I mean, nobody except Kevin.
Her ex-boyfriend?
Yes.
As it turned out, it wasn't a clear break.
Stephanie was able to tell that there was something going on between Tiara and Kevin.
They've still been hooking up, despite the fact that they're both with other people.
"24 hours after 30-year-old Tiara Thomas was gunned down, detectives receive intel from Tiara's friend that could blow the case wide open.
Stephanie thinks that Tiara may have been going behind her fiance's back with her ex-boyfriend.
Well, her friend said after they essentially broke up, they still saw each other.
This was a very significant turn in the case because it opened up so many questions in the investigation.
Could Martell have found out that Tiara had been seeing Kevin?
Detectives wonder if his grief could have actually been remorse over something he had done in a jealous rage.
Or could her ex-boyfriend Kevin be the one to blame? Perhaps the pending nuptials of Tierra and Martel were more than he could bear.
The affair between Tierra and Kevin seemed to taper off the more serious that Martel and Tierra got about their relationship. And once they started setting a wedding date, Tierra became far and far more removed from Kevin.
Another possibility is Kevin's new wife, Brooke. Maybe she learned her husband was cheating on her with Tierra and sought revenge.
Brooke, Martel, Kevin, if what Stephanie is saying is true, any one of them could have had a motive.
And are you sure there's still something going on between them?
Well, he sure acts like it.
It seemed to the friend that Kevin had made sexual comments to Tierra, almost like you're still together.
And what kind of comments are we talking about? Did you ever see them get physical?
Not exactly.
Kevin would send her flirty text messages.
But Kevin's texts weren't just flirty.
Stephanie did share one thing that was somewhat disturbing. His son went to the orthodontist and it was gonna be a fairly expensive bill. And Kevin said something to her like, well, if you're gonna need that money, when can I get an appointment with you?
It seemed like Kevin wasn't going to give Tierra money for their son unless she agreed to hook up with him.
Tierra shared with her that Kevin was already under some sort of financial constraints.
So that was another red flag for us.
With Stephanie's allegations in mind, detectives begin digging into Kevin's finances.
They find out that he's been making these huge child support payments.
Initially, when they separated, there was no formal child support or really any other guidelines set down. They just kind of did it between them. Tierra then in 2015 went to court and final court order was an amount of $1,500 a month taken out of his checks.
To detectives, the court order seemed like a significant amount for someone in Kevin's situation.
Kevin had a lot going on. He had a new wife with a new small child, and he has financial responsibility extended to the new household as well as the old household.
Police officers don't make all that much. I don't think Kevin, given his other bills, could keep up with the child support payments.
Given Kevin's financial statements, it seemed child support wasn't the only thing Kevin had fallen behind on.
We found out on his credit report, there were accounts and collections, there were accounts closed, they were written off by companies, delinquencies of 120 days, a couple of credit cards. It was a mess.
His savings account had about $7.89 in it, and Kevin was basically broke.
Then, 5 days before Tierra's murder, Kevin had hit rock bottom.
Kevin had his vehicle repossessed while him and his wife were at the mall.
They came out from shopping and it's gone.
Which leaves detectives wondering if a desperate Kevin had been pushed to the breaking point.
Was this the motive for Kevin to have murdered Tierra?
If something were to happen to Tierra, obviously the child support to her is gonna stop.
While the theory is starting to add up for investigators, there's just one problem: the timing.
Brooke did verify that Kevin was home. She was up a couple of times that night, tending to the newborn.
However, Brooke, Kevin, and the baby weren't the only ones in the home that night. Kevin and Tierra's kids were also sleeping over there.
So now detectives want to question Kevin's oldest son, Camden.
Maybe he'd heard something or seen something that night.
On November 25th, 2015, 1 week after his mother's murder, detectives have the difficult job of interviewing the 12-year-old at his grandmother's house.
You have to handle, a kid that age with kind of kid gloves. It's asking him, pretty simple questions.
Despite the care detectives take in questioning Camden, he's unable to say whether or not his father left the house that night.
Camden was asleep and did not see anyone coming or going from the house.
It was starting to look like questioning Camden was a bust.
Until the questions turned to the next morning, when Kevin drove the kids to school.
Camden mentions that on the way to school, his dad pulled over at a park.
What's going on, Dad?
Just wait in the car. I'll be right back.
He couldn't really see what was in the bag, but Camden did say that his father stopped and threw a bag in the garbage can.
So now detectives are wondering what was in the bag that Kevin had gotten rid of, and could it be the key to solving Tierra's murder?
It's been 1 week since Tiara Thomas's murder, and her 12-year-old son, Camden, has just given detectives a break in the case.
Tiara's son says that on the way to school the morning after the murder, his father, Kevin Campbell, stopped at the park, tossed a bag into the garbage.
He told his son it was just a bag of trash that he was getting rid of, but it could have been a murder weapon in there. It could have been some of Tiara's items.
It could have been the clothes that Kevin was wearing the night of the murder.
We just didn't know. But this brought up a huge red flag to police.
That's not the only thing the 12-year-old says that raises suspicion.
Camden told officers that his father had inquired about Martell's schedule in the days leading up to the murder, and that's something he had never done before.
It sounded like Kevin was trying to figure out when Tiara would be alone inside the apartment.
And what Camden says next leaves detectives all but convinced that Kevin was plotting her murder.
I asked about the keys. I said, did your dad ever ask you to bring your key? He goes, yes.
The day before Tiara's murder, his father had asked him to make sure he brings the key. We do know from the initial crime scene there was no forced entry, and this may very well explain the opportunity for Kevin to have been able to get in there.
This is very damning information.
Now, all detectives need is concrete evidence.
Camden was able to take the officers to the park where they dropped that bag off.
Though when detectives search the garbage can, they come up empty-handed.
Everything's gone, nothing's there.
The routine pickup could have gathered the trash that Kevin disposed that day.
So that evidence was lost.
Undeterred by this setback, detectives turn their sights to Kevin's home in nearby Hammond, Indiana.
I had a search warrant drawn up and signed by a judge.
They go to Kevin's house, they do a full search, but they're unable to find any hard physical evidence.
There's no murder weapon discovered. There's no article of clothing, as far as I could tell, that connects him to the crime.
However, detectives do uncover one potentially useful piece of information.
They found that he has a home security system.
That's great information because it allows the officers to then go further in their investigation to see what the security system provides.
It was one of those systems where the security company provides 24-hour monitoring of the premises.
We contacted them, and they provided us a history of the activity the system did each day.
Detectives quickly scroll to the early morning of November 18th, just hours before Tiara's fiancé, Martell Robinson, found her barely alive in their apartment.
Kevin maintains that he never left his house. Brooke maintains that Kevin was there. However, the security system says otherwise. Someone in Kevin's home left the house about 4:37 a.m.
After that, there was no activity until 5:55 a.m.
That's a whole hour's time that someone was out. And that's plenty of time to get from Hammond to Portage for Kevin to get to Tiara's house and get back.
This was a big deal for detectives. Their investigation was finally coming together.
We got motive and opportunity.
However, detectives aren't quite ready to make an arrest.
He's a fellow officer. So the Portage Police Department put the Hammond Police Department on notice.
I ended up reaching out to the Hammond chief to tell them he's a suspect in our homicide. So they put him on a administrative leave and then took his gun and his badge.
When the news of the suspension reaches Kevin's brother, James, he gets in touch with the Portage police.
Sometimes you'll find family members trying to either not be cooperative or cover for their family members. James was actually refreshingly candid.
He tells the investigators that the night after Tiara was killed, Kevin had said something very troubling to him.
He shared with his brother, hey, look, I may be going to jail for what happened with Tiara. If I have to go away, can you be the one to take my kids and take care of them?
He thought he was going to be arrested. We're like, this is interesting.
James' statement also firms up what detectives believe to be Kevin's motive.
Kevin's brother felt partially responsible for Tiara's death because he encouraged her to seek child support.
Tiara was being, not very aggressive about getting support, and the children were suffering from that. And he's the one saying, hey, listen, people have to pay their fair share.
However, while James' statement strengthens detectives' suspicion, they want one last piece of information to cement their case against Kevin: his cell phone records.
In addition to the information the phone directly provides, we can ask for cell tower information, and which we did in this case.
The records are telling.
At 5:38 a.m., Kevin's cell phone pinged on a tower in Portage, one of the closest towers to Tiara's home.
The tower puts Kevin within 1 mile of Tiara's apartment on the morning she was killed. It's the final piece of the puzzle.
The officers had enough evidence to charge Kevin with the murder of Tiara.
However, taking Tiara's killer into custody won't be a simple matter of knocking on his door and putting him in cuffs.
They had to arrest Kevin with caution. With him being a police officer, he had a lot of tactical gear and weapons.
He's got some of the same training that they got.
He possessed body armor, so that ratchets up the chances for something bad to happen. So we made a decision that, hey, we're gonna utilize the SWAT team to do this.
It's before dawn on December 3rd, 2 weeks after the murder, when the SWAT team moves into position around Kevin's house.
Talking with the detectives, Kevin had a little bit of a routine.
His wife worked at a 24-hour restaurant. She would start at 6 a.m. He would drive her to work. So the plan was to get him at home really right when he comes out, where he's just doesn't expect us.
We were probably on site by around 5 a.m. I'd contacted the Hobart police chief the night before for their assistance to have them in the area and neighborhoods kind of hold off traffic.
Hey, Jason, you got anything yet?
No, nothing yet.
It seemed like an eternity. It was getting to be past 6 o'clock. We have this arrest warrant. So now I'm trying to decide, do we just kick the door and go in and get him?
I don't see anything on the side of the house either. Wait, I've got a light on inside now.
Shortly after 6 o'clock, he starts to come outside, and we had the house surrounded.
Police! Let me see your hand! Stay there, don't move!
The SWAT team moved in. Who knows what went through his mind? He took off running.
Stay right there! Got it!
On December 3rd, 2015, 2 weeks after the murder of Tiara Thomas, a SWAT team has just confronted her ex-boyfriend, 31-year-old Kevin Campbell, outside his home.
As he exits the house, they try to apprehend him, but he takes off running.
Stay right there! I got him! He's going around! Left leg, come up, run!
We had people in the front yard and tackled him and took him down. He was taken into custody without anyone getting hurt, and you couldn't ask for a better scenario. It was one of the best operations I had been involved with.
By mid-morning, Kevin's in jail and will likely be there a while.
In Porter County, I'm not aware of a murder case that had a bond, and this wasn't any different.
January 9th, 2018. As the trial for Kevin Campbell gets underway, prosecutors face an uphill battle against the former officer.
They didn't have gunshot residue, they didn't have DNA, no footprints or tracks to even tie Kevin to the murder. I mean, it was going to be based solely on circumstantial evidence.
However, prosecutors believe they have a compelling argument based on the financial benefit Kevin stood to gain in the event of Tiara's death.
The child support was estimated at about $1,500 a month, and that was a substantial part of Kevin's monthly check.
Though the monthly payout was painful enough, prosecutors claim that Tiara's engagement to Martell Robinson was the final straw that pushed Kevin over the edge.
He was not just concerned about the money that was going out, but now she's got a new man in her life, and he thinks some of the money is going to be benefiting him.
According to the prosecution, Kevin had come up with a drastic solution.
The prosecutors argued that Kevin intentionally and deliberately took the children during a weekday a time that he normally doesn't take the kids so that he can have the kids out of the house, but also so that he could have access to the house key to get into the home.
Then, while his wife and children slept, he quietly slipped out of the house, though his movements didn't go undetected.
The home security system shows that on the night of the murder, somebody left out of that residence.
At 4:37 in the morning, Kevin left the house, drove to Tierra's home, where the cell phone tower showed he was in the area around that time.
Using the key he took from his son, prosecutors believe Kevin entered Tierra's apartment and crept quietly into the bedroom, gun in hand.
He put a pillow over her to silence the gun and pulled the trigger while she slept.
She would have survived the first shots and thought as she was even able to put up a bit of a struggle. The shot that went through both arms would be a type of defensive wound.
His final shot was to her head, and while she fell to the ground, he took off.
Prosecutors argued that Kevin left the scene of the crime with plenty of time to drive home, walk in the house before 6 o'clock, just in enough time to take the kids to school.
To solidify their case, prosecutors call Kevin's son to the stand.
The son stated that his dad asked him to bring his key with him.
He also told the jury about his father stopping at the park and throwing something out on his way to school that morning.
The significance of that is obviously the fact that Kevin may be possibly getting rid of some evidence of this crime.
This was just devastating, coming from Kevin's own son.
When it's the defense's turn, Kevin's attorney makes the most of the case's circumstantial nature.
The defense was painting this as there was no hard physical evidence, no DNA, nothing really tying Kevin to this murder.
To bolster his case, Kevin takes the stand to provide his own emotional testimony.
He was extremely emotional and hurt by the fact that he was accused, but also by the fact that there was another murderer out there and he was innocent of this crime.
He says he can never hurt the mother of his 3 children.
Kevin also testified that he was behind on bills, but he was not financially depressed to that extent.
Kevin methodically dismisses almost every piece of evidence the prosecution has presented, from triggering the door alarm to stopping at the park on the way to school.
Kevin said he did open the door at 4:30 in the morning, just as the security system recorded, but that he was taking one of the baby's dirty diapers out to the trash.
He argued that the bag in his car was naughty tissues that he collected from his children.
But will his explanations be enough to sway the jury?
He was found guilty. It was a quick verdict, hour and a half or so. That's fast.
Not that Kevin accepts the jury's decision.
In the sentencing hearing, Kevin continues to hold on to his innocence, claiming for the family and community that he would one day find the murderer of Tierra.
Kevin's plea holds little water for the judge.
Kevin was sentenced to 55 years in prison. Under the state law, he would have to serve 75% of that time before he is eligible for parole. He won't be out until his 70s, at least.
Though justice was served, this brutal crime had more than one victim.
This story was tragic for, so many reasons.
3 children don't have a mother, really don't have a father.
They have to know and live with for the rest of their lives that their own father killed their mother.
Those closest to Tierra are doing all they can to give her children the life she wanted them to have.
Tierra's mom had to step up and take responsibility of raising her 3 kids, and she hasn't really had time to grieve because she has had to put, a brave face on for these kids and get them through this.
Martel's still involved in their life. He's taken them places, games, and so that's a testament to him.
But no amount of love can fill the void Tierra's untimely death left in the hearts of her fiancé and her children.
That's gonna leave scars for a long time, or if not forever.
It's just something that shouldn't have happened.
The ultimate tragedy is that a woman who was a terrific mother, and by all accounts, a very nice, wonderful person, was killed and certainly didn't deserve anything like this.